Prions and prion infections. So to start, let's talk about cellular prion proteins, or PRPC. So this is a protein that normally exists on the cell surface of neurons, and they're encoded by the PRNP gene. They're actually quite new to science, so their function isn't exactly known yet. There's a lot of speculation about them being really important in the functions of memory and sleep in the brain. However, that's kind of a topic of debate, I suppose, in science because there's a lot of conflicting data around this. However, it is known that they are important to neuron synapses regulation. So here's an image of this protein. Note all of the alpha helixes. So let's talk about prions. So what is a prion? So a prion is actually just a misfolded version of the PRPC protein, and it stands for proteinaceous infectious material. And despite being infectious, it lacks genetic material because it's simply just a protein. Yeah. So how does this happen? Well, basically what happens is prions are created when a prion comes in contact with a normal PRPC protein. The prion then transforms the normally shaped PRPC into a misshapen prion, kind of by teaching it how to misfold. Teaching it its shape. So this new shape is drastically different from its original shape. For example, the original PRPC protein has about 3% beta sheets in its structure. However, after being misfolded, it has about 40% beta sheets in its structure. So not only is the new shape just completely useless in the cell, but it also makes the protein a lot harder to destroy. So here's a quick little visual of how prions are made. The prion comes in contact with the PRPC protein, turning it into prions, and then more prions get made, and then they clump together. And so again, not only are they now useless, they also impede on other functions of the cell, getting in the way, resulting in a lot of brain damage and just awful things for the body. So prion infections. So prions are really hard to get rid of, and thus they start to clump up in the brain. So typically, your body would defend against an unwanted protein by using protease, which is an enzyme in cells that breaks down proteins via hydrolysis, specifically proteins that are no longer needed or are just harmful. So this enzyme is typically really effective at doing this, but it really struggles with breaking down the beta sheet structure, specifically in prions. And because the prions now have so much of this beta plates, it's just really a bad combination. And because these proteins cannot be hydrolyzed, the body really has no way to get rid of these prions. And unfortunately, the body doesn't really see prions as a threat because, again, it's just a protein. So they begin to pile up, causing a lot of problems. And one of these diseases that prions can cause that you may have heard of is mad cow disease, which is actually just the nickname for bovine spongiform encephalopathy. So bovine spongiform, or BSE, has three main strains: common BSE, the H strain, and the L strain. So the H strain and the L strain are a little unique in that they will just spontaneously form in older cows. Just spontaneously, one of the prion proteins will turn into a prion, and then it just begins to spread. However, common BSE is a little bit more well-known and a little bit more sort of important to humans, I guess, so to speak. So this common strain is what I'm going to be focusing on. So common BSE is transmitted through contaminated feed. Oddly enough, I found this rather odd, actually, is that it's common practice for many cattle ranches to incorporate unused cow parts into animal feed. And if a cow that was previously infected with BSE gets incorporated into cow feed, the prion particles can easily enter other cows and begin an infection. So just a quick little timeline for this disease is it actually has a really long incubation period of about 4 to 6 years. And then symptoms will begin to appear, and once symptoms appear, it's about 2 weeks to 6 months until the cow dies. So during this incubation period, it's important to note that you can't really tell that the cow is sick. But once the symptoms appear, it becomes quite obvious because they have a lack of coordination, vomiting, anxiety, and violent behavior. Here's an image of cow brain, healthy cow brain, and cow brain that is infected with BSE. And you can kind of notice all of the sort of holes or spots in the cow brain that is infected. And that's actually the prion deposits that are sort of getting in the way of the brain's function. So this disease can actually spread to humans. And when this happens, it's called variant Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease. And it's transmitted when a human ingests beef that is infected with BSE. So kind of similar to how BSE spreads between cows, it can also jump to humans. And it's the same infectious agent. So the same prion is being formed in the brain. So some of the symptoms of this are desensesthesia, which is sort of that pins and needles feeling all on your body, but it gradually gets more painful as the disease progresses. Also dementia, poor cognition, irregular muscle movements, prion deposits in the brain, and death. And it kind of follows a similar timeline as BSE with a long incubation period where you can't really tell you're infected, with the symptoms just sort of suddenly happening and then death. So that sounds really scary, but it's actually quite rare. So 0.167 cows per million are infected in the US with BSE, and it kind of jumps in other countries to about 7 cows per million in Canada, for example. But even so, that's a pretty small number. And additionally, there's a lot of regulation now in place to prevent BSE from spreading. So, for example, the FDA recently put it, not recently, it was about 1999. They put in regulations to prevent most animal parts being incorporated into cow feed. So this means that there's less of a chance of prions sort of entering other cows. And because of this, it makes VCJD much rarer as well. So the majority of cases actually occurred in the UK, and majority were in a specific outbreak in 1999 to 2000, in which 200 people were infected. So this disease, while it's not very common or very prevalent right now, it is something to be aware of. It's something really interesting, and it's just interesting to learn about prions because they're so unique. Yeah, thank you. Here's my citations.